that's gone on for the share figure. I was debating what to talk about for the last days of, the share today. Please God, next week we'll get back to our Siddur class, of course. But I figured I just want to go through a few, go through in the Chumash and discuss Egypt as it appears in the Chumash. When we do the Seder, we have sort of one focus on Egypt. And it's actually very interesting how we read about it from the perspective of the Israeli farmer bringing the first fruits. That's the main text at the Haggadah, but it's very sort of Egypt-centered, slavery, etc. But of course, obviously, the relationship between Israel and Egypt is, I guess, really ongoing throughout all of history. But let's just go through some of the key points, and hopefully we'll just pick up a few lessons, a few ideas. Okay, who wants to tell me the first time Egypt is mentioned in the Chumash? When's the first time? I'm sorry, Parsha Noah. Excellent. I'm sorry?
Maybe Avram went down to Mitzrayim?
That's already, I don't know, the fourth or fifth. That's not the first time. No. The first time, I think somebody said in Parsha Noah. It is in Parsha Noah.
Children of Ham.
I'm sorry?
It's part in the section on the children of Ham.
Exactly. So Mitzrayim, like many ancient cities, countries, is actually the name of a person. I mean, I don't, that's how the Torah presents. We've often mentioned names or often symbols. They're not necessarily the actual names, but be that as it may, in the Chumash, Mitzrayim is actually the son of Ham, the grandson of Noah. That already tells you we're not off to a good start because Ham is the cursed son of the three. And therefore, that's the son of Ham. Who's his brother? Who's Mitzrayim's brother? He has three brothers. So let's take a look. I know it's Chumash, but we're allowed to learn Torah Shebichtav also. So here we are in Bereshit chapter 10, Upnei Cham, Cush, Mitzrayim, Put, Uknan. So you already see from the beginning that Egypt and Israel are going to be intertwined. Canaan, that's the land of Israel eventually, is always, that is the brother of Mitzrayim. Now, it's very interesting. In the Chumash, you have a lot of this. The Mitzrayim and Canaan are sort of, foils for each other. The Torah uses Mitzrayim as a foil for what the land of Israel is going to. Let's take, I have two examples I can think of. And, how the Torah compares Egypt to Israel, and they're opposites of each other. So the most famous one, I think, is in Sefer Dvarim. Why don't we take a look there? And Sefer, it's right before we say the second paragraph of the Shema. I mean, it's this part of the Torah right before the Shema. So the Sefer Dvarim in general is the book of preparing the Jewish people for entry to the land of Israel. There are 5 books in the Chumash because each book has a theme, as a separate theme. There's an overall theme, that's why it's one book, and Nevi'im is a separate, sort of book, whatever, Yoshua is a book. It's one book with 5 acts and many scenes. So each book has its own unique theme, overarching theme. And the overarching theme of Sefer Dvarim is the preparation of Moshe Rabbeinu the last 5 weeks of his life, preparing the Jewish people to enter the land of Israel. That's why the mitzvot, and there are, I believe, over 200 of the 613. This idea that Dvarim is a repetition of the Torah is not true. Menachem Leibtag has spoken often about that. And that's not what Mishnah Torah means. It's lishanein, to review the ideas that Jewish people may have heard, to prepare them, but it's not a repeat of the Torah, and many things are not repeated. But there are 200 quote-unquote new mitzvot given in Sefer Dvarim. Most of them relate to national identity, setting up a Supreme Court, how to run an army, how to run, how to run national institutions are there. So, and Moshe constantly warns them, don't follow in the ways of the Canaanites. The people are there, the idol worshippers. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, the land that you're coming to, this is in the 11th chapter, it's not like Egypt. Right away. Now, remember, this is a generation that doesn't know Egypt. These are the children. Moshe Rabbeinu is talking to the children of those who left Egypt, but doesn't matter. It's sort of in the present tense. We also left Egypt, so to speak. It's Sherti's Rad Zaracha Bishkata Baraklecha Kana Yarak. It meets rhyme, tons of water. You just, wherever you go, you just put your foot down, sort of you can irrigate all the land. It's not really such a good land. I mean, it's not nice to say, but that's what it's in, mountains and valleys. So it's hard to cultivate the land, which we know it is not easy. It's the miracle of the modern day of Israel, how they've cultivated the land. That you are going to be dependent on rain. You're going to be dependent on rain. And of course, that is a moral idea that God wants to control the behavior of the Jewish people. And that's why immediately, Vayam Shemo, if you listen to the mitzvot, that's what we say every day, it will rain in the proper time. The Torah just told us that in the land of Egypt, you don't need rain. In the land of Egypt, you do need rain. And therefore, it better be good. And this is, this is the land, though, that God is focused on. It's like God has, if you want to put it sort of a metaphor, God's eyes, whatever that means, are focused on the land of Israel. He has great peripheral vision, so he can see the whole world. But the eyes are focused. God is constantly looking at the land of Israel. And this, by the way, is the source that Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Hadin. This is the main source that they use. That the beginning of the year is like from the beginning, Reshit Hashanah, God is looking at from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. So at the beginning of the year, God decides to be the end of the year. This is the notion. I think we don't have really any sources in the Chumash that Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Hadin. So that's probably the major difference. The Torah is using again as a foil one to the other. By the way, just as an aside, but I think it's important to mention, Baruch Hashem, today, David, you'll correct me if wrong, Israel does not have a water issue. When I was in yeshiva in Israel many years ago, we had fast days when it didn't rain. I remember the Kinneret dropped really low. Mamish, it was very dangerous. Baruch Hashem, Israel is the world's superpower, mamash superpower, like a mile in water technology. I had my class in Shat looked this up recently. We were talking about it. So I think Israel recycles about 90% of its water. And the next leading country in the world, I believe, is Spain at about 25%. That's like more than Wayne Gretzky. I can't mention his name anymore, but when he got 92 goals, the next guy had like 48 goals. Like it's in a different league. You can't even talk about it in the same breath. So we don't have a water problem anymore.
Israel donates water to Jordan.
Right, we don't, right. So, and water is very important in the Middle East. That's not a problem. In other words, you say, well, that's against God's wishes. Like God doesn't want us to have rain. The idea is that we should do mitzvot. So that's not a Jewish attitude, even though it seems like to be a Jewish attitude. Just like God punished Chava to have pain in childbirth, there's nothing wrong with taking an epidural or doing with Lamaze, whatever the people do today, to lower the pain of childbirth. Whenever there's sort of a negative prophecy, we're allowed to do our utmost to defeat the negativity. So that's just maybe that's a sign min hashamayim that God is happy with us. So whatever we invent, I don't know. I don't make such the question, but I'm saying it's not a problem to our water supply. But in the Torah, and for many years, there really was a big issue. So in many ways, I don't know. You're right. How did we deal with it? The second paragraph of the Shema is not as relevant to us. I don't think it was relevant to, the settlers who came here 120 years ago, when they first came, 140 years ago, whatever, they came, that was a real issue. And that's, of course, that's the reason there's a heter mechira, the reason they allowed the land to be sold in the Shemitah year. They basically said, we can't survive here. Like, there's no way we can go a year without planting. It was a totally different country in the state. Okay, what's the second foil, which I think is actually quite interesting. The second foil, I call it a second foil between Egypt and Mitzrayim, and it's much earlier in the Chumash. It's actually right as the Exodus is about, and when God first picks Moshe, as the process of the Exodus is about to begin, and God, it's at the sneh, the burning bush. So where do you have, I call it a foil, I don't know, between Egypt and the land of Israel. So if we take a look here, so I'm just making a play on words on the names of Egypt. So what does Egypt mean, by the way? What does the word Mitzrayim mean? Constricted, which of course is ridiculous because Mitzrayim is the opposite of constricted. It's very wide.
Narrow.
Right, Sar, Mitzrayim, constricted, narrow. That's exactly what it means. And what is that? And where is God going to take the Jewish people? So this is his first talking of God to Moshe Rabbeinu. He tells him to take off his shoes. We're right at the beginning. Take off your shoes. It's holy land. And, I'm the father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Moshe is like blown away. He can't look, and he's afraid, obviously. Who wouldn't be? And God says to Moshe, I see the suffering of the Jewish people. I'm going to take them out. To the wide land. Now, of course, Israel is exceedingly narrow. And before 67, it was like 9 miles wide in certain parts. So I think the Torah, of course, it's almost a satire. We're going from the wide land that is really narrow to the narrow land that is really wide. Because the Torah
Rabbi Kelman,
yeah.
you said saying that Egypt is constricted is silly. It's not, because they had to live along the Nile. The rest of the country is barren. That's why it's called constricted, because they had to live in a narrow strip.
Okay. You want to okay, so you're saying what I'm saying doesn't make any sense. Okay,
Right.
could be. Is that really true? They only live around the Nile? Is that true nowadays? I really don't know.
At
Because
that
my
time,
understanding is the Nile irrigated all over the place. That's what the Torah is saying. You use your foot, they would pathways. Okay, I don't know how many miles they could do that for. But okay, I still think the fact that but it's the idea, of course, it's from Egypt to Israel. But the fact that Israel is a wide land, also that can't mean it literally. This means in a spiritual sense. I pointed this out before, which is I find actually an astounding point. I mentioned to a couple people, say, "Oh yeah, that's really interesting. I never noticed that before." That's I'm missing something. When God appears to Moshe, He says to him, I'm going to take you out of Egypt and I'm going to bring you to the land of Israel. He does not mention one word, about going to Har Sinai. I'm going to let you make Mitzrayim to the land, this very good land. And then the only time it comes up when Moshe Rabbeinu says, but they're not going to listen to me. Paro is going to think I'm out of my mind. So why is he going to listen? So God says to Moshe, here's a trick for Paro. Go tell him, you know how Paro is going to know you're real, you're not a faker? Because Paro is like a religious man. Egypt, all kinds of religions. It's a very religious country. You're going to tell him you want to worship God on the mountain. You're going to worship. Okay, religion. That I get. But that's sort of almost a subterfuge that God is throwing in there. I just find it interesting. And then the same thing, it repeats himself. When Moshe goes to the elders, here, go gather the elders that say God has appeared to them. And again, I'm going to take you from the poverty of Egypt, which is also kind of funny because it's not an impoverished land that way, to the land of Israel. And again, no mention of Sinai. And they're going to listen to you. Sinai is only Paro. So twice the Torah makes mention that the role of God's mission is to take the Jewish people from Egypt to this very wide, beautiful land. I just find that a fascinating thing. I'm not saying Har Sinai was there, but it's really sort of the goal. I mentioned this not too long ago. The goal was to get to Israel, not to get the Torah. The Torah is the mechanism to be imported in Israel. In other words, how are we going to live our life in Israel? Okay, so here are the details. Here's your constitution, and it goes according to the Ramban. I mean, now, according to the Ramban, mitzvot don't really apply to the Ramban based on a Sifri, a rabbinic commentary. Mitzvot don't really apply outside of Israel. And I'm not talking about Shemitah and Truma and Birchas Kohanim. I get blessed here every day, twice a day now, because with Musaf, I'm getting blessed twice a day, which, by the way, Birchas Kohanim should probably be done in Chutz La'aretz too every day, but that's a different, it's very unclear why that isn't the case, but that's not the case. We only do it on Yom Tov, but the Ramban means like mezuzah and kashrut and Shabbos, because it's sort of practice. That's if the Ramban was a big Zionist, and based on the pasuk in Yirmiyahu that we're going to go to exile, and we should make markers. We shouldn't be rusty when we come back to Israel. We should know what to do. So we came back to Israel after 1900 years. So we knew what a mezuzah was. We know what tefillin is. We know what kashrut is. But we don't know the laws of Truma and Masrot, we are very rusty. And we don't know the laws of war, unfortunately, and the laws of how to set up a government, we surely don't know. So, how do we, we haven't done it for 1900 years. So we couldn't practice those laws in Spain and in Poland and in Russia. We could practice tefillin. So that's the Ramban, really.
Kelman,
Yeah.
you said that the Ramban said even the negative commandments don't apply to chutzlars. That can't be
As
possible.
far as I know, I
How
will
could you say?
because
what about
okay,
don't
so let's
steal?
go back to where we were. I'll show you. I'll just show you very quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but let's go back to our source we talked about, that God is focused on the land. There's not enough rain. So God says, if you're bad, God's going to get angry and it won't rain anymore, right? And you're going to be exiled. And the next pasuk says, you're going to be exiled. And then it says, put on tefillin. Put on tefillin, teach Torah, and put on a mezuzah, and have a mezuzah. What does that have to do with going into the land of Israel? I mean, being exiled. So Rashi, and Rashi is pretty important commentary. Normally we consider him. So Rashi quotes the Sifri. I have it in English, but let's do it in Hebrew because, I think it's in Rashi. No, or is it V'chara Af Hashem? Pretty sure it's in Rashi. Hold on, I think Santimeter. Maybe that's it. No, not
You
there.
can sum it up. Just what does Rashi say?
Yeah, no, Rashi says that even though you would think you don't have to keep mitzvot, I don't know why it's not here in Rashi, unless it's only in the Ramban. I don't believe that. Hold on, I'm sorry. Okay, give me 1 second. This is where it should be. Yeah, here it is. Okay, good. Now I can breathe easier. Put on your tefillin, basically. After you go into exile, be accompanied with mitzvot, or a sign. It should be like a sign mitzvot. Henichu tefillin. So they shouldn't be new when you return to the land of Israel. He quotes a pasuk in Yirmiyahu. Hatziva lach tzionim. Put markers. Yirmiyahu, that's from pasuk Perek Lamed Aleph. But Yirmiyahu tells the Jewish people, you're going into exile. You're going to be there for 70 years. And he tells them, it's such an important idea. And obviously the modern applications are very obvious. He says, build homes, get married, plant. Don't live like in refugee camps that, I'm going back, I'm returning to the land of Israel. No, you're going to Babel. It's only 70 years. That's not so long. Only 70 years. You're going to live there, like you're going to learn the language, and you're going to go to, Babylonian business school, and you're going to, plant, and you're going to invest in the market. That's what Yirmiyahu says. Maybe it's wild, because what do you mean? We should go. We're in exile. We should be mourning. Tisha B'Av. What are we doing? How can we live a nice life? Someone says, no. Live a good life in Babel. You'll come back. Of course, they lived such a good life. Most of them didn't want to come back. And then he says, but you know what? Still keep the mitzvot. Why would I think I don't keep the mitzvot? Because it's the Torah, the mitzvot are meant for land. It's not. Of course, the mitzvot of Shemitah and Truma Maser, but even the non mitzvot the mitzvot she'enat liyat beguf. Your question, no, what about the negative command? Because Rashi says tefillin mezuzah, doesn't say kashrut and Shabbos. So I don't know. I have to look in the Sifri, see if the commentators talk about it. I don't know. It doesn't bother me. I mean, whatever.
How can you say you can steal?
No, I don't know. Very good. Okay, that's correct. We mean the ritual mitzvot, right? It's
positive.
Like the Rabbi makes the famous distinction. A Jew is supposed to want to eat treif, right? I failed at that mitzvah. I don't know. I lost my desire because I was trained since from 2 months old not to keep kosher. So I lost my desire to eat pork. I don't know. But I'm supposed to have a desire. The Rambam says I'm not supposed to have a desire to steal. So yes, I believe I'm right. It doesn't mean don't steal, don't kill, don't commit adultery, but it means the ritual mitzvah. Maybe you don't need a seder. Well, a seder in exile. Why do I seder in exile? That makes no sense. We celebrate freedom, so how can we celebrate freedom? And that I must say, when I'm in Israel doing whatever, I met a Gumburger the other day. She was here at they had a really beautiful evening. Why am I forgetting her name? Goldberg, Rachel Goldberg, not. There are two Rachel Goldbergs. There's Rachel Goldberg Poland. I mean, unfortunately, one lost her husband, one lost her son. They live on the same street, apparently. This I just found out. And the Rachel Goldberg with 8 kids. So she was here the other night. They honored, if you Doron Perez was here. It was really a very beautiful, moving evening. And Rachel Goldberg, who speaks fluent English, she spoke. It was like unbelievably inspiring. She had 8 kids. The oldest is, I don't know, the oldest is in their early 20s. Their youngest about 8.
The one's husband was a rabbi.
Right. He was the principal of Himmelfarb School. He was a rabbi in Sohar. He went for 20 years to a secular kibbutz every year in Yom Kippur, and she never went. Except this year, now that her husband wasn't there, she went to the and she was like blown away, like people, like what her husband did for people. And he was apparently, and she's building a center now. She's just saying like her husband was all about uplifting people and making people happy. And she said, you got to get up. She said, you got to get dressed and put on makeup and live a happy life. She was unbelievably inspiring, and she plays the violin. And she played with her kids. Her kid plays the guitar or whatever. Then one kid plays the piano. So they were performing. It was like really heartbreaking, and it was really beautiful. I mean, that's the strength of the people here is really astounding. So Gumburger was here for part of the time. She didn't speak. They didn't have her speak, but I spoke to her very briefly. I just went over to her to how inspiring these people are, and it's really it's kind of unbelievable. I don't know where people get the strength from, and they see it. It's a mission, and whatever God's will is God's will, and they're proud to be here. But it's really anyways. That's just. So I don't know how we got onto that exactly, but okay, I'm here. I mentioned it, but so I don't know. But in terms of the negative mitzvot, right? So you can say we're next. How are we celebrating? How do we celebrate the right? So I mentioned I know why, because a Gumburger, as you I think you probably all know, she refused to eat non-kosher food, and she observed all the holidays much good. Which was if you look at her, I actually find this even more fascinating. This is Israel. You wouldn't. I don't want. I'm even saying that, Bill Pat, but. If you looked at her, you wouldn't say, "Oh, she's like really frum." Like that's not what you would say if you saw her. And not that she dressed anything improper, but whatever. It's not and it's just like her emuna and strength. That even in the Gaza hell, they're gonna keep Pesach, and they're gonna. So that's an amazing thing. But that comes from Yirmiyahu. That comes to Jewish people. No matter where we are, we see hope and we see the better future. But that's a big chiddush of the Torah. On our own, what the Palestinians do makes sense. They're in refugee camps forever and ever because they're waiting to go home. That's creates a lot of problems. Okay. Anyways, let's get back here. I want to really, I don't want to politics at all, but anyways, okay, in Israel, it's next to impossible not to talk politics, I think. But okay, let's continue on a little bit more. Okay, so you have Egypt and Israel, Eretz Tova or Chava, Mitzrayim and Tsar, whether it's because it's a foil, it's like a joke, or like Zev says, no, because they had to live by the Nile, so they had a very narrow place to live. Okay, Zev, I accept that, but still, Eretz Yisrael is being in Eretz Rechava, where it really isn't. Okay, let's go very quickly. It's a few more places. Let's say in Bereshit. Where else is Mitzrayim mentioned? Next, where's Mitzrayim mentioned?
I wasn't at the beginning with Lot.
Yeah,
Right,
with
so
the
that's
Hashem.
Abraham first. So I was going to test people. So
look,
3 years
it's
ago,
Sodom.
I was looking at my notes. Three years ago, I gave a shiur on Lot and Pesach, right? The Rashi famously says in a comment that, like, what I have your mind, that Lot served the angels matzot. It says Abram served them not only chametz, Abram served them basar v'chalav, by kechama ubakar. And by the way, that's also very important. Whatever it means, the Medrash, that Avram kept Torah, that's not what it means. But even if you want to assume that Avram mamish kept kosher, he did shchita, okay, I don't believe that, but fine. If you want to take a literal explanation of the Medrash, so how could he serve the angels or the guests, whatever? That's his problem. He's a meshugana. You don't put your chumras on somebody else. And I mean that in all seriousness. If he had a stringency, that was for him. But why did he wants to welcome guests? He's a meshugana. He doesn't want to eat meat and milk. But his guests can eat meat and milk. But Lord serves them matzah. So why did he serve the matzah? Because it was Pesach. Now, why did he really serve the matzah? What's the real? That's some metric. What's the pshat? What's the real reason?
That's
It's
what
fine.
everybody ate, and it was quicker to cook.
Yeah, it was probably quicker to cook. He wasn't expecting them. And Stom, they didn't have there wasn't like a guest house. They didn't warn people. You had to smuggle in the guest. So he didn't have very much time. So he served them matzah. But Rashi makes this comment, it was Pesach. So I gave a whole shir. You can, whatever. So go listen. But even the word vayit mama, that's, of course, a very Pesach word. V'lo yachlu lit mameya. And you have a lot of language, which is the house, the importance of the house, and then celebayit, and the mashchit coming. So you have all this language.
And the door.
Right, the door, and you have the whole story about welcoming guests, how you treat guests. That's the whole purpose we left Egypt, because so of course the story of Stom, Lot is the exact same story of Egypt. Doesn't mean he ate matzah and he said, he had the 4 children, the Chacham and the Rosh, they didn't talk about Yetziat Mitzrayim, Lot's not even, his descendants don't even go to Egypt. But it is a beautiful comment. And of course, like the Midrash, as long as you understand it non-literally, the Midrashim are beautiful, as I say all the time. If you understand them literally, the Rambam, not me, I forget who, when I mentioned this a few weeks ago, that the Rambam calls you a fool. And that's one of the nicer things he says about you. He says you destroy Torah. He says these people destroy Torah because people make fun of Torah. You tell a 15-year-old kid that Lot had a Pesach Seder because it was Pesach, and you just talk like that, literally, the kid's going to be turned, if he's normal, the kid will be turned off of Judaism.
But isn't it also said that if you don't believe, you're considered a heretic?
No, the Rambam says so. You have to. So somebody asked me. It's a source. It's introduction. I can send it to you. The Rambam's language is very powerful. I don't have it now in Hebrew, and I can Hebrew and English. You can look it up on Sefaria. It's the introduction to the 10th parak in Sanhedrin. The Rambam says those who take midrashim literally destroy Torah. I mean, some midrashim are literal, of course, but the Rambam says even worse. I think he said are the people who say the midrashim are meaningless, who say the rabbis are idiots. That's a terrible thing to say. When the rabbis say it was they were brilliant, but you just have to understand how they said it. He said only the Rambam was an elitist. Only the few people in the middle, only the really smart people can understand that the rabbis are not talking literally, but they have a very deep message. So that's Lot. Okay, that's all we'll talk about there. You want to listen? Avram goes down to Egypt, and of course, now, by the way, what I should have mentioned earlier in terms of a foil is Yitzchak. Everybody goes down to Egypt when there's famine. There's lots of famine in Israel. That's what the Torah tells us. Lots of famine. So in time of Avram, time of Yitzchak, time of Yaakov, and Avram goes to Egypt. Yitzchak wants to go to Egypt, and Yaakov goes to Egypt. And to get food. Why does Yitzchak not go? Because God tells him not to go. Why not? So I'm sure he said, no, let me, they can't go. But basically, what's the Torah telling us? That Egypt is not a place for pious people. Egypt is a corrupt. He's Cham's son. That's the beginning of Egypt, right? Mm-hmm. We'll see soon some more. And Yitzchak is too. I don't know what the word is. I don't want to say naive. That's but Yitzchak is too sheltered. I've mentioned before, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch has a beautiful comment, but notwithstanding his comment, I guess it didn't fully work. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says that right before Yitzchak is born, the Torah tells us that Avram moved to Gerar. You remember that in chapter 20 in Bereshit. Avram moved to Gerar. Like, who cares? What's Gerar? So Rav Hirsch claims that Gerar was like the capital city of the Negev. They were living in a little hick town, and he was going to have a child. And he didn't want this child to grow up in a hick town. You have to grow up you have to see the world around you. You have to be cultured. You have to be educated. So he moved to Gerar, so Yitzchak would be exposed to, it's such a Hirschian, Torm Derech Eretz. It's a very beautiful Hirschian thing to say. But apparently God felt a little otherwise. God felt Yitzchak was still too sheltered, and Egypt would be too dangerous for him. Avram and Yaakov were very different. Avram from Lavan, I mean, he knew all the tricks of the trade. They were very, they wouldn't be tainted. They were strong enough that they could retain their religious identity. And God was clearly afraid. Yitzchak could not, right? Think the plus or minus, whatever it is, God is afraid. Yitzchak can't. By the way, that answers, of course, a very important point we don't talk about enough. Why were we slaves in Egypt? There are two questions. Why did the Jewish people have to be slaves? And why did they have to be slaves in Egypt? So, right. So, and there's two different ways to look at it. Is it a punishment? It's education. Of course, it's both. It's both. It was both a punishment, but it's also we needed it. But why Dafka Egypt? Because Egypt was the most advanced country in the world. Right. And God, if the Jewish people are going to develop, we should develop in the most advanced country in the world. You're going to go to some hick country, third world country, the Jews won't be a great people. The Jews saw architecture, art, science, everything, this mathematics, the pyramids. I mean, the Jews saw the greatness of Egypt. Why do you think they kept wanting to go back to Egypt? Why do you think only the Midrash says, whether it's true or not is irrelevant, but the rabbis are perceiving Egypt that only 20% of Jews left? That's like insane, right? If you could get out of Europe in 1941, 100% of Jews would leave, but Egypt, it wasn't so bad. And the Netziv points that out, that we at the Seder, it's terrible. And it wasn't so terrible. There was a little terrible here, a little terrible there. They threw some babies in the not to belittle it, but the Ramban himself says, but Parah put an end to that. But Parah, she was like 80 years ago. But Parah, when Moshe was born, but Parah went to her father and said, enough of this killing the baby. You don't hear any Jews thrown in the Nile afterwards. And why would the Jews want to go back to Egypt? And he says, often we were slaves to royalty. That's not such a bad thing. Some had it bad, some had it better, whatever. So that's why they didn't leave. They didn't want to leave, and they wanted to go back. So Egypt is a great country, developed country. It's also, unfortunately, morally deficient. So it's sexually abusive. That's why on Yom Kippur, we begin the Torah reading, which talks about all the sexual morality of the Torah. Kemasei Eretz Mitzrayim, Asher Yeshaptem Ba, was Eretz Canaan Lo Tasun. And there again, Torah is comparing Canaan and Mitzrayim. They're combining them. They're brothers, right? Both apparently in Canaan and both in Mitzrayim. Their sexual practices were very unethical and very immoral. And the Torah and then it says, don't marry this one, don't marry that one. The Torah contrasted to Egypt. So, and I mentioned, if anybody listened, I know I sent it out at 4 a.m. in America time because on my podcast this week, I did on last day of Pesach. It's on the amazing Rashi that I can show you. I didn't where the Torah says you'd have honest weights. Vayikra 19. I'm the Lord of God who took out of Egypt. What does honest weights have to do with Egypt? So obviously the Torah is telling us that Egypt, their business practices were improper. But Rashi has 3 words. Rashi just says Almanat Cain. It's like mind-boggling. God took us out of Egypt, so we should have honest weights. Almanat Cain. That's all Rashi says. But God wanted to see greatness, but to understand that greatness in science and technology doesn't equal trace morality, a lesson, of course, we all know too well from the 20th century. And but it is still important. And there is something. German Jewry did produce a lot of greatness because they were exposed to greatness. Unfortunately, that turned into terrible things. So The Torah wanted us to be slaves, dafka in Egypt. And Abraham Avinu didn't want his son growing up in a hick town. So he moved to Gerar. But it was Yitzchak can't go to Egypt. Other people, and you know what? And for some people, the toll was too much. Actually, apparently for 80% of them, it was too much. They couldn't maintain their Judaism. I mean, what do you expect from 200 to how many Jews in Russia after 7 years of communism can maintain their Judaism? So, by the way, I always like, well, let's use this for fun. How long were the Jews in Egypt?
210 years.
210 years. Okay, very good. Okay, anybody have any other opinions? How long the Jews were in Egypt? No, I like doing this. I'm sorry, it's part of my not niceness. Okay, let's just go here.
Well, it says 430 years, but we know Rashi tells us
That's what I'm
210.
saying, yeah. So I'll just point it up, Perek Yud Beit. The Torah tells us, Umosha b'nei Yisrael ashiris mitzrayim shloshim shana v'arba shana. And the amount of time the Jewish people were in Egypt was 430 years. And you know what? In case you were asleep when the Baal Kori read that pasuk, the Torah tells us, Vayhi miketz shloshim shana v'arba shana. It's like, and it was at the end of 30 and 400 years, in the middle of that day, that we left Egypt. So I find it fascinating. I'm not only why, but what right do the rabbis have to come along? We all know that 210 years, but it's not so clear at all. But the Torah is black and white. Like, you can't get more blacker and whiter than that. That we were in Egypt 430 years, which, by the way, breaks into two beautiful halves of 215 years. Because how old was Avram when God appeared to him? No?
70.
75.
75.
Although this is not in Egypt, but it was 75. And how old was he when Yitzchak was born? 100. So there's 25
100.
years. And Yitzchak is 60 when Yaakov was born. That's 80, 85. And Yaakov goes down to Egypt at 130. All those are verses in the Torah. No midrashim for that. So it's 215 years from God's covenant with Abraham till Jacob goes down to Egypt, which sort of, that's 215. That's not 430 in Egypt, right? So obviously, and Chazal are obviously saying it didn't just mean Egypt, but it's interesting. The Torah does use that 430, and that 430 can neatly be divided into two halves of 215. The reason the Torah, the rabbis say 210, well, they based on a gematria, Chishevet Haketz. First of all, God told Abraham 400 years. Okay, 400, 430. It's not a punishment. I believe the Medrash says that Shevet Ephraim. No, correct me if I'm wrong. Shevet Ephraim left early, and that was because they thought 400
Right.
years.
Yes, it was Ephraim.
Right. They got slaughtered. Okay, but whatever it is, God said 400. He made it less, or Mitzrayim doesn't necessarily mean Egypt, means exile from time. But it's just, one should be aware that this is not like a simple question. And also, it could be even one of the ways the Torah likes to often contradict itself, because it wants to get two messages. The Torah always contradicts itself, because that's the Bible critics didn't make up the fact that the Torah contradicts itself. Rabbi Yishmael said it. We say it every day. One of the fundamental, one of the most 13 principles we interpret Torah is by analyzing contradictions. So we resolve there is a contradiction, so we have to somehow resolve. And some contradictions are not resolvable. That's okay. How long do you have to eat matzah for? Well, here's a classic contradiction. How long do you have to eat matzah for?
Either
So
one day or
pasuk
7.
says 7 days. 7 days. V'shivat yamim, that's in Parshat Bo. And in Parshat Re'eh, it says Sheshet yamim tocha matzot. What do you mean? It's a contradiction. So the Gemara, be'erev tochlu matzah, katuv hashlishi, at night. So the only obligation is 1 day. 1 day obligatory, 6 days. If you want to eat bread, you have to eat matzah, and matzah bread, whatever. And so it's a total of 7, but only 1 day's obligation. But the Torah actually tells us the obligation is 6 days or 7 days. Never tells us the obligation is 1 day. But okay, that's how You need a broader, feel. Why did this Torah work like this? That's not my expertise at all. But these things, they're just fascinating questions. How the Torah is written, because it wants to give multiple messages. Okay, that's so we had to go to Egypt. Egypt is the breadbasket of the world. One thing I'll point out, which I've again has come out in other times we mentioned, but I think it's very important, and also we don't pay enough attention to it. And that's the pasuk here in Bereshit. Okay, so storm, yeah, Lot loves storm by the way, because it reminds him of Egypt. That's the same thing. Lot and storm is matzah, Pesach, right? Why does Lot go to storm? Because it reminds him. Before God had destroyed it, it's Kagan Hashem, Keretz Mitzrayim. It's like the garden of God, like Egypt. But if you look here, and by the way, okay, all right. By the way, and here's another sort of foil. The borders of the land of Israel go from Egypt. Okay, that doesn't mean anything, but still, we're next to Egypt. Like Ham is killed in Mitzrayim, Canaan. We're entangled together throughout all of history. But here, of course, is the pasuk. We all know this, but we don't pay attention to this. When Yosef's brothers come down to Egypt, and he's blown away. He still doesn't want to reveal himself. He has to cry. He goes into the room, private room where he can cry, and then he washes his face. It's interesting how the Torah describes all this. Really fascinating. And then he says, "Give him food. Simu lechem. Give them to eat." So they ate in 3 rooms. Why? Because the Egyptians couldn't eat with the Hebrews bread. It's a toeva. That's a pretty strong word, toeva. It's an abomination to eat bread, and I've said many times, you want to know why we don't eat chametz on Pesach? There you go. That's why we don't eat chametz on Pesach. We discussed last week, 2 weeks ago, right, that the mitzvah to eat matzah prohibition was given before they left Egypt, right? That's we'll for another time to continue that. Discussed that last week a little. So the real reason, or the initial reason we don't eat chametz on Pesach is because of that pasuk. That's what I believe. I think it's pretty obvious. In other words, and we know historically, you can look it up on Wikipedia. Historically, bread making, sourdough was invented in Egypt. Many of the techniques of fancy bread making were in Egypt. And when the Torah wants us to leave Egypt, it means we leave their sexual practices, their business practices, and their food practices. And they made a big deal, and they separated. They wouldn't eat together. By the way, the verse implies, and I tried looking up in the Mefarshim because I didn't notice this until I was preparing this year, because that's why I always thank you so much, because I learned so much from having to prepare this year. I never paid attention, but it looks like, and I don't have any of my books here with me, it looks like the Egyptians wouldn't even eat with Yosef. Even Yosef is a Hebrew. In other words, he ate by himself, that's Yosef. V'lahem levadam, that's the brothers. Ulemitzrayim levadam. Why couldn't Yosef eat with the Egyptians? So Kiyachlu Mitzrayim lechol in Ivri, because Yosef is in Ivri. Remember, he gets out of jail. The butler says the Yesh Nar. What does he say? Nar Eved Ivri. What he says, he's a Hebrew. They knew he's a Hebrew. Nobody denied. Unlike Moshe, who tried to hide it. But Yosef never hides Ivri. So it sounds like they wouldn't even though he was the viceroy of Egypt, they wouldn't eat with him. The Netziv says no, that cannot be. That cannot be. They for sure ate with him. But he wanted to eat separately. I don't know. I really have to, if I have time, somebody look, I would just find that fascinating question. Maybe even Yosef,
Rabbi
couldn't, was never
Kelman?
fully. Yeah, Debbie, yes, Rakasha.
What is the phrase used when it says that Yosef is in charge of everything, except that Potiphar left everything in his
Akim
hands except
Alechem.
for
Is that what he says? Oh, let's look that up. Oh, thank you very much. I
Levado,
think that's
because I think it had lechem.
Yeah, I think so.
And
That's going to be where? That's in chapter
right?
37, right? No, that's in chapter 39.
39, I think.
Yeah, it's 39. Okay, let's just see quickly here. Oh,
Rachet halechem levado, because
Yeah.
here it just
here we go. Okay.
reminded me
right.
because
Okay. Yeah. Vayasova kol shelo b'yad Yosef. The Potiphar left everything in the hands of Yosef. Ki im halechem asher hu ochel. That's very nice.
So-
And I think Rashi comments the lechem doesn't mean the lechem means his. What does Rashi say? I'm pretty
Right,
sure.
Ishto.
Ishto, I think that's what Rashi says. And of course, it didn't work. Esha Potiphar was very interested in all the lechem. But that's also very interesting, the use of the word lechem right there
Right.
when Yosef gets Egypt. Of course, this is all connected. This is not like a coincidence. Like we're so, it's a problem. We learn what we learned in kindergarten, and it stays with us the rest of our life. It's sometimes like Bali Tshuva have a big advantage sometimes because they come to Judaism as an adult. So right away with the sophisticated approach. But okay, it's whatever. That's anyways. Okay, that's the way it is.
No, but when you were saying it, it just dawned on me that.
Yeah, thank you. I did not think
Again,
about.
the
Thank
word
you. Yeah.
lechem.
Okay, thank you very much. Just let's do a couple of things. I think it's just getting a little late, and I've yontif in 2 hours, but okay, 2 hours is still enough time. Okay, so a little more. Hagar, right? It's very interesting. Egypt is a place of fertility. Let's get to Shema. Okay, by the way, Egypt is a place where they revere death. Obviously, that we all know that the pyramid. I mean, who's been to like Egypt? When they have the Royal Ontario Museum, like in the Egypt. What do they call it? These Egyptologies. Everybody goes. Like millions of people go running about the pharaohs of Egypt. Oh, it's so exciting to see. For Jews, it's sort of. I think it's like mixed feelings. You have to figure out which pharaoh was that. We don't even know which pharaoh it was, which is also part of the Torah's plan. I remember hearing that from Dr. Norman Lamb saying, Torah purposely doesn't identify what Paro is. Paro is an idea, the concept, the Egyptian rule. It doesn't matter if it was Ramses or whatever Paro, it doesn't matter. That's the Torah's purposely didn't let us know who it was. But anyways, they revere death, how they bury and the mummification. And Yosef, of course, when he dies, he's mummified. That's Yaakov too. They embalmed him. And I know that's no longer a Jewish practice, but that's what they did. And the last word in Sefer Bereshit is none other than Egypt. And I just find that interesting that here, this is the end of Bereshit. Vayamet Yosef, it's the exact opposite of the beginning of Bereshit. The beginning of Bereshit is all about life. Life is teeming, plants, God is creating, everything is good. It's tov ma'od. Wow, everything is fertile, amazing. And by the end of Bereshit, it's the exact opposite. Joseph is dying. He died, they embalmed him, and they put him in an ark in Egypt. So it's very interesting. The Torah ends in Egypt, Sefer Bereshit, and then, of course, Sefer Shemot opens the fertility of the Jewish people. And, of course, that's not the first time. How else do we know Egypt's a fertile land? Hagar. How does Abraham have Yishmael? Hagar is an Egyptian, and that's Sarah is infertile. For Abraham to be fertile is to marry an Egypt. Obviously, I think it's also connected. Egypt is the land of fertility, and by the way, what's Hagar's name? See now I think you can get a deeper meaning and I'm just as I speak, this idea popped into my head. Thank you very much. What does Rashi say? Who is Hagar? What was Hagar's other name? That's not what Rashi says it in the opposite way. Let's just take a quick look here. I think I have it here. Bereshit, 25. Okay, and he says here Keturah. Right. What does it say? Vayosef Avram Yikach Isha Shema Keturah. Okay, so that's his third wife, or whatever you want to call them. Hagar, Sarah, and Keturah. Now Rashi says it's Keturah, right? Also in Hebrew. He Hagar, this is Hagar, B'nikra Keturah. Very nice. Why in the world is Rashi saying this? There's no reason in the world. Why should I think Keturah is Hagar? The Torah says she's Keturah. If she was Hagar, the Torah would say she's Hagar. It's very clear it sounds like taking a new wife. And he has 6 new kids, right? People don't know. How many kids did Abraham said? Oh, he has 2. Yes, no, Abraham has 8 kids. He's got Zimran, Yikshan, we never heard of, really, Midan. Midjan, I've heard of Midjan. I've heard of them. Yishbaz and Suach, right? And then, these are the children of Keturah. I don't know. Now, why would I think Hagar is not her real name? Is this because what does Hagar mean? Hagar means a foreigner. Ushma Hagar. Probably that wasn't her name. That's what they called her, the maidservant. They came back from Egypt, so they came back wealthy. Hagar, the maidservant, and of course, the Jewish people. The whole point of Egypt is to learn how to treat Gerim properly, 36 or 46 times. And what does the Ramban say? Why were the Jewish people punished? Because Sarah mistreated Hagar. It's if you don't believe me, because it's pretty, the Ramban.
Geirus, Abdus, and Inui.
No, that's a different thing. Right. But here, let's just take a look here. We'll go here quickly, 16:6. Okay. So they have a maidservant Hagar, which of course she's the foreigner from Egypt, the fertile one, and she can't have kids, and it's very beautiful of Sarah, but it was too much for her. She bit off more than she can chew. That's all the comments. The Balei Musar point that out. You got to be careful. You can't strive higher than you can reach. And Sarah said, Abraham, marry my maidservant, they'll be fine. No, sorry, a love triangle doesn't work. It's not going to work. Sarah thought it would work. She did an amazing thing, but she couldn't do it. She couldn't do it. And he says to, Abraham says to Sarah, I could do whatever you want with her. Who cares? She's just a lowly maidservant. So the Ramban says, he's not so happy about this. The Ramban says, our mother sinned in this oppression. Begam Avraham, and Avraham also sinned to let her do it. V'shama Hashem, and God heard her affliction. And therefore she had a kid. It was going to cause lots of problems to the Jewish people. I mean, if a non-Jew said this, we'd call him an anti-Semite. Because basically what the Ramban is saying is all the persecution of the children of Hagar, Yishmael, all through history was because it's a Jew's fault. Because but that's always our attitude is always what did we do wrong? When the rabbis say the temple was destroyed because of Sinat Chinam, that's not what they mean. They mean, what should we learn? The temple wasn't destroyed of Sinat. I mean, it's true, when you're weak, you're easily defeated. Of course, that's true. But there was this sort of the Romans, of political reasons, whatever it is, the Jews were saying, what lesson can we learn? And that's why the rabbis have 10 different reasons why the second temple was destroyed. Sinat Chinam is just the most famous of them. Because every rabbi is saying, what should we learn from this lesson? What are we supposed to learn from that? What should we learn from October 7th? We haven't figured that out yet. Maybe some people have, I don't know. But the Jewish approach is always to look inwards, even though it's not our fault. That doesn't mean we blame the victim, God forbid. It just means to look for a lesson. Okay, so that's interesting with Hagar. Okay, I'll end off maybe in the nice way, because I see it's getting late, but you see our whole everything. We have an anti-Egypt culture in many ways, but we can never hurt the Egyptian. We can never hurt the Egyptian. The Torah tells us that Egypt was our homeland. That's what I said all the time. We have to treat Gerim nice, because this is where we became a great nation. In Egypt had many great things. We learned tremendous great things. We have to have lots of gratitude towards you. Gratitude, the good and the bad. Here the Torah, as we're about to enter the land of Israel, so the Torah tells us, can't have a mamzer, fine. An Ammoni and a Moabite, that's Lot's kids. Lot who made Pesach, right? The first Pesach. Lot, Ammoni, Moabite, never convert them. That's why Ruth, there's questions they could accept her, fine. They figured out how to accept her. Because they're mean. They're not nice people. They wouldn't give you bread and water when you were in the desert. Also lechem, interesting. They wouldn't give you bread and water. Okay, that was the main food, of course. And you should hate them. Lo tidrash shlomam, don't make peace with them. Interesting. Lo tita evadomi, he's your brother, the Adamites. Lo tita, but don't hate an Egyptian. Higer ha'iti beit. So you lived in this country for 210 years, 430 years. You're there a long time. Banim asher v'lulam, you know what? They can join the Jewish people. Let them convert. Not the first generation. You got to wait till the grandchildren. You got to wait till Dor Shlishi, they're allowed to convert. That's what the Torah tells us. And then the Torah, as I first heard from the Chama Leibowitz, right? This is rather startling, right? The Egyptians have just been, every home, ein bayit asher ein sham meit. Every single home has had somebody die on the Bechor, and the Jewish people then have to leave. They say, get out of here because we're all going to die. But Techzak Mitzrayim Alam, they want to get them out really quickly. Kamru Kulana Meitim, I'll add the English just so you can see. We all be dead. and they took their bread. Hold on. And before they left, they took gold and silver. They asked the Egyptian, no, we just killed your firstborn. Would you mind giving us some gold and silver? Sure, no problem. Okay, whatever. God said, yeah, they left them. And I know, and the Kamalibitz is where I first heard this from. The last memory of Egypt is that they gave us gold and silver. The Torah did that on purpose. The Torah didn't want us to remember the bad of Egypt. I mean, obviously a little bit. The Torah wanted us to remember the Egyptians. That's where we wouldn't be here without the Egyptians. And the last taste of Egypt is they gave us gold and silver. It's such a, I mean, I know it sounds very liberal, but okay, I think the Torah is liberal. I don't know what to say, but it's a very beautiful idea that that would sort of be our last memory as we leave Egypt. And it's true, maybe the Egyptians wouldn't have done it. God had to twist their arms. But still, the point is, so we should remember Egypt in a positive light because there's many great things from Egypt. So basically, just let's very, very quickly review. The Torah is totally intertwined with Egypt and Israel. It's not just on Pesach, it's the whole year. And it begins with the birth of Egypt. Egypt is Canaan's older brother, right? I mean, that's what it is. He is our older brother. Like Mitzrayim and Canaan. Canaan is the fourth or the third brother, I don't remember now, of Ham's children. But already they're Ham's children, so they're going to be problems. They're going to be moral problems. And the Torah doesn't hide the moral problems. The sexual ethic, the business ethics, the way they treat strangers. When the Torah, they mistreat strangers. We can't mistreat strangers. And of course, you have this story. But Egypt is the place of food. Egypt is a place of fertility. It's a place where we become a great nation. There's great, great things to learn from Egypt, but also to learn just because they have great things doesn't mean their moral code is very good. You get a trial run of Egypt in Stom, a little bit. Lot gets a trial run. And we have to be, as we say in a different context, you have to respect them and be fearful of them. We have this sort of dual relationship with the Egyptians. It can be dangerous, right? Yitzchak was not allowed to go to Egypt. But on the other hand, the Jewish people, God wanted us to go to Egypt. As the people, we didn't become a nation in some third world country. We had to go to the best of the best. And that's a very important lesson when, again, we have to remember Egypt, not only every day, the Haggadah says every night, all the days of your life, the day, the morning, and the evening. So, okay, any questions, comments, but that's, somebody asked me where the Adam was at Dumburger. It's the hotel I'm at. My wife's cousin is running a Pesach program. I'm speaking a few times here, not really, but so we're here in the Dan, where am I? The Dan Hotel near Mount Scopus. It's not the center of town, but it's a nice hotel and whatever. So they did the program here with everyone. It's a really very moving program. And anyway, so that's where we are. Gematria of Kates. Oh, Redu is 210 and Kates is 190, right? It's both Gematria. So God took off, somebody writing to me privately when I said the Gematria, how the rabbis get to 210. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chishev HaKates. He thought the end. He recalculated the end. So Kates and Gematria, Kuf Tzadik is 190. So take 190 from the 400 of promised Abraham, you get 210. Right? They all say Redu Shama, go down. Redu and Gematria is 210. Okay, but we normally don't derive halachot and stuff from Gematria is cute. Parot lechachma. They're side steps. They're not the real essence of Yiddishkeit. What can I say? They're nice side points. All right, but that's it. That we have a complicated relationship. Life is complicated. Eretz Yisrael is Rechava, and Mitzrayim it's Sar, and it's a place of water. It's easy. It's easy to be, easy come, easy go. You got to work a little harder. Okay, thank you very much. We'll continue. We'll have I think our next class is going to be on Tuesday, right? Sunday is Yontif for people living in America and in Canada. And so there's no class Rabbi Leak this week. And Mark Shapiro is going to do no class on Monday. So we'll have class on Tuesday. We'll send out our schedule next week. I know everybody's sort of off on Pesach. And thank you very much. And want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach. I will say, I've talking how beautiful Israel. Maybe I'm crazy. I actually missed 2 days of Yom Tov. I like Yom Tov very much. And I like having an extra day Yom Tov. I only keep it one day here. I think that's what we're supposed to do here. But that's the one thing I do miss being included. I know you all think I'm crazy, but that's okay. Anyway, so I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach, and we look forward to learning you. And of course, next week, please God, we'll be back to our regular Siddur class. And okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Zev, what's
Chag
the weather
Sameach.
like? Intro. Chag Sameach. Debbie, where are you? I see you in the backyard there with the are you in Cleveland? Uh-oh. Who
Oh,
froze?
Florida.
I'm sorry.
Because snow.
Where
I'm in
are you?
Florida,
You're in Florida.
in
Oh,
Orlando.
okay. The second Israel. I know. That's it. I think I imagine there are more. Yeah, whatever. There are a lot. I mean, there are Israelis here. Like it's not. I mean, the hotel has Israelis. The program is Israeli, pretty much, either Americans or American Olim. But yeah. Anyways, okay. Enjoy. Have a nice. How many people are in Orlando? There must be 50,000 Jews in Orlando. No, that's what they say. Thousands of people go to Orlando. I don't know, but anyways, enjoy. Okay. Chag Sameach.
Sameach.
Okay.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.